Crag heaved his great battle axe, cleaving the fallen in two. Its blood splattered on his bare chest, highlighting the tattoo of an enormous mountain. "More blood for Secheron," Crag said, smearing the blood with his calloused hands. "Every drop brings honor to Ararat, our ancient home." Crag clamped the great axe to his back and swapped it with his two short swords in a single motion. The next wave of demons ascended up the hill in front of him. He charged, landing in the middle of the demons, and spun. A whirlwind of death and steel, his swords cut through the bodies of the hellspawn, spraying demon blood everywhere. Crag pivoted, planting his boot into the skull of a knocked down but not yet dead demon, and swapped weapons again. His greatsword erupted from its sheath as he dug it into the earth beneath him, sending a wave of massive rocks into the remaining demons. The demons' bodies were shredded by the attack, with limbs and viscera flying from the impact. At the end of the encounter, Crag stood alone. His only companions were his weapons and the berserking rage that flowed through his veins. He could feel the pain of loss again simmer to the surface of his mind, the pain he felt for his people, for his homeland, and for his ancestors. But he quickly shoved those feelings down. "More blood for Secheron!" he cried. "It is not enough!" Welcome in, everyone. I'm echohack, and this is an early look at the best classes in Diablo 4. As with all beta content, keep in mind that the game can change rapidly before release, and game metas will change even faster. This is the first video in a large series of Diablo 4 content covering every aspect of the game in detail, so make sure that you're subscribed. Now, let's begin with a tier list, and as we go, I'll rank each class, covering each class's strengths and weaknesses, and providing some details as we go along.
Now, Blizzard gave me access to an early preview client of Diablo 4, and in that client, I was only able to play Barbarian, Rogue, and Sorcerer, and I was only able to level up to level 25. So the content of this video will reflect that.
I have videos for each class coming to the channel to look at builds, skills, stats, legendary powers, and other detailed information that we won't cover here in this overview. Now, regardless of the rankings here, keep in mind that Diablo 4 is a dynamic game, and each class has a unique feel. So regardless of which class you choose to play, there's a fun and rewarding playstyle for you. Now finally, we expect that Diablo 4 will be frequently updated after launch, and each season will offer new content for players. So expect to see these rankings change rapidly in the future. Starting off with S tier, we have the strongest class in Diablo 4, the Barbarian.
Equipped with party-wide buffs, the Barbarian shouts offer incredible resource generation. The class also has passive fortify mechanics that will make you tankier than anyone else. This combined with the ability to equip 4 weapons at once make this class both tough as nails and deal incredible damage.
Now let's dive in and take a quick look at the strengths and weaknesses for Barbarian. First up for strengths, we have the class specialization, the arsenal system. This is insanely strong. While every class has their own specialization system, the Barbarian's arsenal system gives them 4 weapon slots on your character. Not only is this useful when leveling, when you might want to use your strongest weapon for all of your attacks, but when you start collecting legendary and unique items, the bonuses on all of your weapon slots apply during combat. You can equip both a 2-handed bludgeon weapon and a 2-handed sword, along with 2 one-handed weapons. This extra 2-handed weapon that you can equip is extra strong because 2-handed weapons scale most legendary powers at double the amount of their one-handed counterparts, or the glove and ring slots. But wait, there's more. Each weapon type has an expertise that can be ranked up by hitting enemies with that weapon. This expertise is active any time that you're using that weapon. Needless to say, by itself, Barbarian's specialization is the strongest in the entire game, offering them a total of 3 extra legendary powers over any other class, one of which is at double effectiveness. It's absolutely crazy. So second strength. We're only on the second strength. Barbarian is ridiculous. The skill tree gives you every benefit that you can imagine.
Now, both the Rogue and the Sorcerer have sort of a focus on a particular kind of skill tree. For example, the Sorcerer focuses on lucky hit chance. The Rogue focuses on mobility.
The Barbarian, on the other hand, has everything you could ever want, including enough Fortify to keep you at 100% at all times, enough movement speed to get your character at the maximum movement speed in the game, percentage-based life healing on resource usage. It has 3 party-wide buffs, including one that increases your damage reduction by an insane amount. It has 2 mobility skills, including Leap, which is as good or better than Sorcerer's Teleport, and a variety of damaging skills that allow you to conquer any content that the game can throw at you. Okay, third, legendaries augment already insane damage and defensive options. Do you want infinite Fortify but don't want to build your skill tree for it? No problem. Equip a legendary that gives you free Fortify for each point of Fury you generate over your maximum Fury. It seems like, regardless of which skills you want to use with Barbarian, that there's a viable build for it, and there are supporting legendaries that will carry you through at least all the way to endgame. All right, fourth up, group buffs are best in slot for solo and group play. The Barbarian has 3 shouts, and especially Challenging Shout are incredibly strong, giving you insane buffs both for your solo and group builds. Your teammates will always love you for buffing their survivability, movement speed, and resource generation at all times. All right, now let's dive into weaknesses. First up, most skills are melee range. The best defense in any Diablo-style game is never getting hit. Well, with Barbarian, that's very unlikely to happen, as almost every skill is in melee range, with Upheaval being a notable exception. Some skills like Rend are even right up on top of the enemy melee range, making gameplay really challenging when you have a high density pack of enemies. Others, like Hammer of the Ancients, are a bit more forgiving, but still, if there's an enemy with a ranged attack or a very long melee reach, you're probably getting hit. Early on during the leveling stage of the game, you'll find that some mobs are just gonna crush you. Beware of bears, hardcore players. Number 2, some attack animations are long. Unlike Rogue or Sorcerer, the Barbarian has some of the longest attack animations in the game. Upheaval is a good example here, giving you a massive AoE with high damage, but putting you at significant risk if you miss your target. This results in a gameplay style that requires a little bit of planning and practice. Number 3, ultimate skills are weak. It seems like most classes have relatively weak ultimate skills, but the Barbarian's ultimates are worth avoiding entirely. In fact, even when leveling, I'd personally choose to either pump points into my main damage ability or one of the many powerful passive nodes on the tree, overtaking an ultimate skill first. Eventually, at the end of the tree, the ultimate passive will definitely be worthwhile and powerful,
But I just don't see anything super special about the Barbarian ultimate abilities. Perhaps the best out of them is Wrath of the Berserker, which might be worth picking up when you first reach this part of the skill tree. But personally, I quickly found myself reallocating those precious 3 skill points into my main core skill as soon as I could when leveling to 25.
All right, fourth and last here on the weaknesses, basic skills are slow. A natural consequence of long attack animations and melee range skills means that Barbarian's basic skills aren't as useful as other classes for generating primary resource. You'll mostly encounter this at the beginning of leveling your character, as Barbarian has many other options for Fury generation at higher levels.
Especially when Warcry and Leap come online for your Barbarian, you'll start fueling Fury extremely quickly.
And you'll want to avoid those basic skills as soon as you have any other option for Fury generation. All right, next on our tier list, still an S tier, is the Nimble Rogue. Rogue can do both melee and ranged attacks, as well as lay down traps to destroy advancing enemies. Practically speaking, ranged attacks dominate the Rogue playstyle, with faster attack speed and higher damage than most other builds. Still, the possibility of a melee rogue with stealthy damage, or traps or some other hybrid between those, seems pretty exciting in the future. But at least right now, ranged is king of the rogue builds. Now, let's jump into strengths and weaknesses. First, under strengths, we have mobility and stutter step. Allows players to do extremely difficult content. Approaching combat at range with high mobility allows the rogue to dodge all damage while simultaneously dishing out massive hits and doing crowd control. Penetrating shot shines here, allowing you to deal AoE to large packs of enemies and still retain excellent single target damage, especially through imbuement skills. Your movement skills aren't dependent on enemies being present, so you can effectively sprint forward or speed through empty sections of the game and maximally blast through easy content as well. Since you speed through the game as fast as Sonic the Hedgehog, the Rogue will be the class of choice, I think, for speedrunners and players that value high-intensity combat. Alright, number 2. Basic skills are very strong. Rogue is one of the only classes in the game with comparatively strong basic skills. As a result, you will have a very strong start to leveling. The combination of mobility and access to basic skills that can deal massive damage early on may make Rogue the best leveling class in the entire game. Alright, number 3, we have imbuement skills. The Rogue can imbue any attack with cold, shadow, and poison damage. This is hands down Rogue's strongest and most flexible set of skills. Cold here is best for crowd control, Shadow is best for AoE damage, and Poison is best for single target DPS. Each imbuement skill only has a few charges though. Any choice here is good, and the particular damage type that you pick will depend on the rest of your build. Almost every build will certainly invest in this part of the skill tree, and even during leveling there's a huge damage spike when you reach these skills.
Alright, number 4.
Strong ultimate skills. Many classes have underperforming ultimate skills, but not the Rogue. Both Shadow Clone and Death Trap do excellent damage and offer incredible utility. Rain of Arrows' primary job is doing AoE damage, and unfortunately, most Rogue attacks already do a great job at AoE damage, so this skill should probably be avoided. Shadow Clone is especially useful because it can give Unstoppable. Alright, let's jump into weaknesses. Survivability relies on dodging damage. Rogue doesn't have any sources of barrier and fortify that are easily accessible through the skill tree, and other survivability options rely on triggers like critical hits, for example. Fortunately, it's quite easy for the Rogue to stay at range and blow up the screen with massive AoE damage and crowd control,
But there were a few times where I got cornered by mobs that I could not escape from, and when that happens, it's very dangerous. And that leads us into our next one, number 2. Some mobs force melee range. Now, some mobs are particularly good at gap closing you and dealing melee damage. This is where you can quickly get yourself into trouble. Some ranged builds might be able to get around this by including a trap skill like Poison Trap or Death Trap in the build, but otherwise, beware of melee heavy mobs.
Number 3. Traps have extremely limited range and area of effect. While you can augment the range of Death Trap a little, Poison Trap's area of effect is very limited, making it almost impossible to use offensively with any consistency. There are some strong trap legendary synergy possibilities, so we haven't really completely ruled out a trap-only based Rogue build for the future.
Number 4. Stealth mechanics seem weak. Because most strong mechanics in Diablo 4 hit a small to large AoE, it's almost impossible to avoid enemies who drop damage all over the ground. This means that stealth/concealment mechanics are mostly useless offensively and might only be used as an escape. And who needs an escape when you already have the insane mobility that the Rogue provides? While it's fun to mess around with the concealment and stealth mechanics, there doesn't seem to be any super interesting uses for it yet. Maybe we'll find out at higher levels over 25.
Alright, let's jump into our third class, and first in A tier, the Sorcerer. Complete with 3 different elements, massive amounts of lucky hit chance, and some highly mobile abilities like teleport, the Sorcerer is an excellent choice for veteran and new Diablo players alike. The class mechanics make this class the best for players new to Diablo. Casting at range with Fireball, opening up the skies with Blizzard, or shocking enemies with Chain Lightning is a very easy to understand playstyle. At higher levels, even newer players can understand the simple mechanics behind lucky hit chance and put together a build that excels at blasting down enemies at range. Now let's pause for a minute and talk about lucky hit chance. Some legendary items will have an effect that reads like, Lucky Hit has an X% chance to do something. You'll also notice skills that all say Lucky Hit Y%. Now let's say in this case that the legendary item has 30% lucky hit chance, and the skill that you're using has a 50% lucky hit modifier. This means that when you attack using that skill, that you actually have a 15% chance, in other words, a 30% times 50% chance to trigger the effect. In other Diablo games like Diablo 3, you might be familiar with this concept as a proc coefficient. And it's about the same idea here. Diablo 4, however, has a couple of different sources of lucky hit chance, and there are also ways to improve your lucky hit chance, whether that's you can slot in gems, or you can even get this as an affix on rings or other pieces of equipment. Now let's jump into the strengths and weaknesses for Sorcerer. First of all, in strengths, strong builds for each element: lightning, fire, and cold. Many classes only have 1 or 2 strong builds, at least right now in the early beta stages of the game, but Sorcerer is the exception to this rule, and it comes out strong with 3 very easy to understand identities. These revolve around lightning with its melee range and AoE damage, fire with its high damage output and high lucky hit chance, especially with Hydra, and cold with crowd control, devastating the battlefield with chill and frost. Now, while this isn't necessarily the class of choice for the ultimate ARPG veteran who has 10,000 hours in every single ARPG, Sorcerer is a class that every beginner should play, as it offers the most friendly way of getting to know the game's mechanics. Now, number 2 is lucky hit chance. Now, we already talked a little bit about lucky hit chance, but lucky hit chance for the Sorcerer is just absolutely incredible, especially with Hydra. Hydra has an incredibly high lucky hit chance. If you get yourself a really good lucky hit effect, we'll just constantly be proccing, just all the time with that lucky hit chance. It really is an incredible strength of the Sorcerer that no other class can even come close to. Right, number 3 is high range damage output. The Sorcerer just really excels in this, especially in single target damage with fire builds. Definitely try out fire and try going for some more of that single target high range damage output on the Sorcerer, and you'll do really, really well.
All right, number 4 is teleport. Teleport may be the best mobility skill in the game, alongside Barbarian's Leap. It not only allows you to instantly move from location to location, but it also grants Unstoppable, deals damage, makes you take less damage, and can even buff the damage from your Crackling Energy mechanic, which we'll talk about in another video, or reduce the cooldown per enemy hit. Unstoppable is incredibly important for any class, as it allows you to escape a terrible fate to being stunned, frozen, or knocked down and killed in the process. So make sure teleport is on your bar. It's almost a required skill for the class, in my opinion.
All right, let's dive into the Sorcerer's weaknesses. First of all, we have completely ignorable ultimate skills. On paper, Deep Freeze, Inferno, and Unstable Currents are all good ultimate skills, but in practice, it's challenging to make them incredibly useful. They don't really do much to help fill in the Sorcerer's weaknesses, such as giving Unstoppable, or adding important sources of Fortify, or additional Barrier.
So many times you'll pop one of these and you'll have already destroyed the enemies around you. Still, it can be useful as you're leveling, and when you first access them, you'll want to have one of these ultimates on your bar. Maybe they'll continue to be useful later on. We'll have to see what Blizzard shows us past level 25.
This will allow you to spend your precious skill points on other, more important modifiers. All right, second up, we have difficult to find sources of Fortify. Most classes have at least some skills that offer a consistent source of Fortify, but Sorcerer really has absolutely nothing on the skill tree that offers it. All right, number 3, outside of teleport, Sorcerer has low mobility and can't effectively stutter step. Sorcerer has some decent mobility with teleport, but when it's on cooldown, you're going to be in a tight spot. Unlike Rogue, you don't really have that constant mobility of skills buffing your movement and letting you dash and stealth all over the place. It's still important to think carefully about how you're going to approach a fight as a Sorcerer and not getting too close, because that might be the end.
And finally, number 4, few sources of Unstoppable. Sorcerer again gets the short end of the stick here defensively, with almost no sources of Unstoppable. Teleport here is, of course, the notable exception, but this is actually kind of problematic at times because you use teleport for movement all the time. As a result, you might find that teleport's on cooldown when you really need to extract yourself from a bad situation.
Now, Flame Shield here does have a really strong option if you're facing enemies that are crowd controlling you often, as it does give you immune. But even Flame Shield only lasts for a couple of seconds, and it's on a long cooldown. It would be infinitely more useful if it gave you Unstoppable and it lasted twice or 3 times as long. You'll have to rely more on keeping enemies stunned, frozen, or chill, or you're just going to have to blow up the entire screen to stay alive as a sorcerer. Tell me down in the comments, which class do you think that you're going to play during Diablo 4? In any case, coming up in future videos, I'm doing detailed guides covering each class, so stay tuned for that. I'll see you in the next one. Peace!